Hello, everyone. We should be live. Welcome to the Enterprise panel here at ParDreamin 2020. We're going to give everybody just a minute to start flowing in, start saying hi in chat. Let us know where you're at, where you're saying hello from. I always like to know where people are located, especially being, a global company and everybody all over the world joining. So, hi, Bruce. Hi, Erin. Hi, Casey. Awesome. See some people flowing in now. Teresa from North Carolina. I'm in Atlanta. I'm not too far from you. Kayla, Michelle, I am far from you. California. Awesome. All right. We see everybody trickling in now. Everybody is saying hello in chat. We can see we've got people all over trickling in. I'll start with an introduction for this enterprise panel for myself. I am your moderator today. Hello, everybody. I am Celine Newsom. I'm a CRM and marketing automation strategist at Serconte. I am so excited to be hosting today's enterprise panel. I've got some hard-hitting questions for our panelists today, but before we jump into questions, let's get to know who is on our panel today. And guys, if you could just go through and say your name and your company, maybe just a really quick overview on what you were focused on marketing-wise in 2020 or what you're going to be focused on in 2021. And then one more thing for your intro. How many years you've been utilizing Pardot and Salesforce would be a really good intro point to hit on. So Lindsay, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm Lindzee Barrera. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations for Simplot Food Group. And so Simplot is one of those companies that if you're not in the food service industry, you may have never heard of us. But I can promise you if you've eaten out, you've probably eaten one of our products. So we're a major agribusiness company located in Boise, Idaho. And I work in the food group, which is responsible for a line of frozen food products that sell to commercial and non-commercial food service operators. So our main product line is French fries. We're famous for the McDonald's French fry. And we actually invented the first commercially viable frozen French fry back on a handshake with Ray Kroc. And our business with McDonald's is still based on a handshake. So that's Simplot in a nutshell. This year has obviously been a very interesting and challenging year. We've had to really pivot the way we do business and in fact change some of the ways we go to market. The food service industry has pretty much been decimated, especially some of our smaller mom and pop businesses. And so one of our marketing goals is becoming a partner beyond product and helping many of our customers through this extremely challenging time. And Pardot helps us do that. We've had Pardot for about 3 years at Simplot, Salesforce for a little bit longer, so we use Sales Cloud. And so I guess that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a big French fry fan, so chances are I have had a Simplot product before then. Luke, why don't you kick us off next?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, firstly. So my name is Luke Watton. I am Senior Manager for Vonage Marketing Operations, looking after a team of 4 people across the globe. I've been using Pardot for about 18 months. Actually, a Marketo for the past 6 years, and then recently moved into Pardot. So Vonage is a supplier of VoIP technology. You may have heard of us from our adverts back in the 90s. We've pivoted into B2B VoIP. So obviously this year with the current situation we're in, we're all about enabling remote work and remote employees across the globe. Vonage has been on an acquisition strategy over the past few years, and with that has come a lot of integrating our marketing tech stack. We currently run multiple instances of Salesforce, Pardot, and even some other MA platforms in there as well for bang for buck. So yeah, that's my current position and where we're at.
Awesome. Happy to have you today. Rebecca, end us out with these intros.
Hi, thanks for having me along as well. So I am Rebecca. I'm based in London, England, and I work for Zoopla, which is a property website. So very similar to, for all of those who are from the US, very similar to Zillow. So our business is a marketplace, and it attracts both a consumer audience and a customer audience, B2B audience. And my role focuses purely on the B2B side. And the audiences I'm talking to are estate agents, real estate, and new property developers. It's been a bit of a wild ride this year in the property market in England. There were kind of some tax changes that came with the opening up of the market again after we'd had our UK lockdown, and that kind of drove huge amounts of demand. So we've been kind of running around doing loads of different things. But in terms of our Pardot use, I've been using Pardot personally for about 5 years. I've been at Zoopla 3 years, and we've been using Pardot there for that entire time, and integrated with Salesforce. So just that kind of a bit about our audience. Because we work in a vertical market, with a very established brand, kind of our main sort of goals and focuses are on engagement and retention, but we do still have, we don't have whole of market, so acquisition is still important for us as well. That's it from me.
Awesome. All right, for those of you that are just now tuning in to the enterprise panel, we ran through a list of intros, and if you're wondering what we're going to cover for the next, we'll call it 40-50 minutes here in the enterprise panel, we're going to be diving into how these global enterprise companies are using Pardot in collaboration with their tech stack. So how do they create meaningful relationships with their prospects, driving sales, and reporting out on marketing initiatives? So you guys probably have similar questions to what I'm going to be asking them today, but if you have more, feel free to utilize the Q&A feature, and we'll try to keep an eye on that, and if time permitting, we'll add some of those in. So with that being said, first question up that we would love to know about is how Pardot and Salesforce fit into your tech stack. So how are you utilizing them? Like if you could draw a map of everything that's touching each other, where does Pardot and Salesforce sit? And how are you using it to improve your user experience? We'll start off with Luke.
Sure thing. So essentially, Pardot and Salesforce at Vonage are really at the core of the tech stack. Salesforce especially is, we're a Salesforce first company. Essentially, Salesforce really does act as, to an extent, the source of truth for a lot of deals that we have, sales opportunities. Vonage has grown via acquisitions in the past few years. It's bought a big, large company, API company called Nexmo, and then it also bought a company called New Voice Media. So each of them currently have separate Salesforce instances. So essentially, we utilize in our organization, we've also got 2 versions of Pardot, and then we've got 1 Marketo. And essentially, the Pardot Salesforce links that we are utilizing allow for those integrations of Pardot. Essentially, it becomes our MA platform for those meaningful relationships. When it comes to straight like collaboration, essentially it's the allowing us to unify our stack as just having Pardot, to have the team, my team, enabled to be able to do more with the same platforms. For us, the speed to lead that we are dealing with when somebody puts in a request a contact from Vonage, we try and call that lead within 5 minutes. That's kind of the SLA that we have with our SDR team and our sales function, because we know in the smaller businesses where they may be buying 5, we call them lines, 5 lines of Vonage, we know that speed to lead is critical. So essentially, the integrations and the very deep integration that Pardot has with Salesforce becomes critical in allowing us to go from website to Pardot to Salesforce in under 5 minutes. It's actually quite a nice thing to be able to say that like 90% of the time, if there's no sync errors, which I'm sure everybody on the phone is very aware of, It's nice to say that somebody can put in a contact us request form and receive a telephone call within 5 minutes, because it does have, an impact on closing business. We know that on the large enterprise stuff, it might be a little bit different because of the time it takes for deals to close. But essentially that deep integration Pardot has with Salesforce, and when it comes to that single system flow through to an SDR at the end of the flow, Pardot really becomes kind of critical in that, because essentially it's, you've got that single point of entrance for us. We've just actually recently launched a new website, and Pardot is now dealing with all of our contact us requests. So it's quite a, important piece of the puzzle. And then we've also got a lot of tech plugged into Pardot and plugged into Salesforce, which of course is, busy working its way along Drift, Convertica, WebEx. We've got On24, like all of that stuff really does become, allowing business to scale up its operations to make sure that we are where prospects are and we are engaging with them. So that's my kind of piece.
Yeah, I like, as soon as you said you've got that 5-minute SLA and that deep integration between Pardot and Salesforce helps you achieve that. I mean, that's huge. I can see a lot of companies wanting a quick SLA on that, especially for sales. And that would be a huge win to be able to get data from one system to the next to meet that SLA. So really love hearing that storyline from you. Lindsay, what can you tell us about how you and your company work with Pardot and Salesforce into your current tech stack?
Yeah, so Luke, 5-minute SLA, that's awesome. I'm gonna take that back. I appreciate that. So we use Sales Cloud and Pardot, and I would say, it's the central place for our MarTech stack. We also use Sitecore as a CMS, so all of our forms on Sitecore are Pardot forms, and that's how we're able to bring in leads. We also use some other tools like NewsCred, which is a content marketing services platform that really helps us organize, take in work, and publish work. And then we also have a new tool that we launched, which is HighSpot. That's been really awesome in being able to recommend content for our reps to send to our customers. That's been a pretty seamless launch. And then some smaller tools like Wistia and Olark for chat. And we are also bringing in high velocity sales soon. So that's kind of general basic of our marketing tech stack. In terms of how Pardot helps us improve our customer experience, there's 1.4 million food service operators in the US. We have about 130 sales reps. So the math doesn't quite add up to be able to give that one-on-one personalized sales rep experience with our customers. And so Pardot helps us be able to reach those customers and provide value to them outside of the sales call. I just have a couple quick examples. So when the pandemic hit, we saw our food service operators really have to pivot their business models. So a big segment of ours is K-12 food service nutrition professionals. And if you haven't thanked one of them lately, please do. They're our heroes. They are feeding our kids right now during this time. And they've completely had to pivot where they're actually offering delivery and curbside takeout. And they're not small business owners who are used to pivoting. So we have been able to provide them helpful content to help them pivot their business, give them examples from other food service professionals who are doing it. We've also done the same with our mom and pop restaurant type audience, give them really hands-on advice on how to do delivery takeout, how to package your product correctly, how to deal with third-party delivery. That's really tricky and can be not a moneymaker at all. So it allows us to broadcast content that's valuable. I don't believe in fluffy content at all. It has to be super valuable. I also have a tip that we use is we don't gate all of our content, and that can be hard to overcome. You can say, I want instant ROI on this content, but For us, it's more important that we're providing value and building our brand versus getting that contact information right away. If we provide value, they will raise their hand and they'll sign up for more information.
I love that note about no fluff content. Like, there has to be a purpose and a why behind why your team is even going to spend the time and resources to create it, you know, and answering that why is such an easy thing to ask, but such a really, really hard thing for organizations to actually answer. You know, like, why did you actually build this infographic or video? But if you're like crystal clear on that and you have your strategy, then it's super effective. So totally agree with that. Rebecca, I've got a different question for you. And this is going to be a question I think that everybody listening can really, really benefit for, because no matter the size of your company, you probably struggle with this. And if you don't, type in chat and let us know all of your tips. So, Rebecca, strategy for keeping your data clean. How do you prevent bad data from entering into your systems? Like, what kind of challenge do you deal with and how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think that if you've worked in different businesses, you'll see that it is always a challenge, especially when you're dealing with kind of data coming in from different sources, and from sales teams as well, who you have to kind of bring along on the journey with you to understand why you need that data to be a certain way. So I think some of the challenges that we face is similar to kind of what Luke mentioned. We're a business that grew out of acquisition and we grew really quickly. But as I mentioned before, we're a vertical market. So we're really speaking to one audience base. There's like around 20,000 estate agents in the UK. So we have a finite audience. And we have multiple databases that have insights and data on our customer base. And Salesforce is one of them, but it doesn't have everything in there. One of our product ranges is a CRM for our customers. So we have like loads of insight in terms of usage and users in there that we don't include in our Salesforce database. But at the same time, we do kind of run the communications from Pardot for all of those businesses. And so our strategy around that is really all about collaboration. And I would say like that's my major kind of takeaway for everything to do with managing Pardot in an enterprise business is really around making sure that you have those partners in other teams that can help you to come up with a strategy that's going to work and help you implement it. So in our organization, it's all of marketing. And then it's also our sales operations teams who are an invaluable partner to us, and the sales team themselves. We've recently gone through a big data cleansing process where we've kind of implemented kind of basic best practice in Salesforce. And by that, I mean kind of getting rid of duplicate records, restructuring our account hierarchies, looking at all of the details and data in a contact record. And then we've kind of taken our teams through a full go-to-market practice around that so that they can understand why we've done all of that, what every part of the structure in Salesforce means. And that's been influenced very much by what we need to see in Pardot. And then following that process of cleaning the data, we are then kind of moving the best practice and the rules for governance into our client engagement model. So we've kind of worked with our teams to create the model in which they engage with the customers at certain points through the year, depending on the size of the customer, depending on a number of different variables. And then within that process, there are points within there that we're asking the sales team to contribute to keeping the data clean, and at those specific points in that journey. And that's quite a new process, so we're yet to see how well that works. But so far, I mean, an example of it was at the start of when we first went into our UK lockdown. We did a massive project with the sales team to contact all of our customer base. And as part of that, we had a commercial opportunity aligned to it. But as part of that, we asked the team to to collect data on the segment of the client. So we've done some previous work with McKinsey to pull together a segmentation, but we needed to get that into the database. And then secondly, the sentiment, the way that they were feeling about the market in that moment in time. And that's really helped us to be able to use that data to create more meaningful conversations with them.
Yeah, and I love your point about utilizing sales, right? If they're talking to a lead, for example, on a regular basis, as they should be, they have the ability to go into your system and update information that you know is wrong. And if anybody's wondering, well, how do I know what information is wrong in my system? In the chat, Erin posted, an actual like Pardot tip for you guys to utilize dynamic lists to check and clean data. And, another thing that I can add there from a Pardot example is grab data out of Pardot for your hard bounce backs or your soft bounce backs and see if you have bad email addresses that are just typos, right? And then use Rebecca's example here of leaning on sales and equipping them with the data that you know is wrong and seeing if they can update it, if they've got that information for you. So just some tips there. Luke, do you have anything that you can share on how Vonage keeps their data clean?
Sure. So essentially, there's many forms of data, I guess, is probably part of it. There's sales data, opportunities, accounts, but I think for this conversation, I'll stick to leads and more inbound flow stuff. So essentially, I've actually used previous integrations with tools like Ringlead to deal with, because essentially, when it comes to cleaning data, it has to be scalable. It can't be a process of updating records one by one because nobody's going to be able to do it. So we actually used to utilize the tool called Ringlead, which I'm sure some people on the call have heard of, which is kind of is for dealing with deduplication, but they also now allow mass changes. So essentially, when you've got large data sets, you can kind of do this kind of, you need to do stuff that scales up. And we were using Ringlead, allows for fantastic matching logic for deduplication. I mean, duplication across when you've got multiple sales forces and you've also dealing with lots of inbound, you've kind of got to deal with does this lead exist? Pardot's got some core functionality on that, but finding other MarTech providers that can kind of add on into the Salesforce, kind of gives you extra power. I think also one thing I would say is around process of list uploading. Everybody in marketing operations is always uploading lists. I think following standard processes for those list uploads, when it's no matter what the program, if it's an event, whatever it is, having one standard of this is how data gets uploaded into the system and trying to hone that into a certain team to make sure that they are always following that process. And also working with data providers when you do integrate to understand how their data is coming into the system. Everybody comes up against stuff like state and country pick list values, all those kind of little bits and pieces that are nuances in the data, but essentially understanding from data providers what data they're going to be passing and how it's going to be formatted also helps. Recently, I've started to put validation on Pardot fields just when we're importing them, just to make sure that data is clean. But from a Pardot point of view, for me personally, it's very much about understanding when the team are uploading and when inbound leads are coming in, making sure it's clean before it gets to Salesforce. When it gets to Salesforce, dealing en masse with Salesforce data, really, in my eyes, you need to start looking at other providers. Like Ringlead, where you can deal with huge data sets for dealing with deduplication and any other issues coming up, and then good business processes. I always think it's business processes dictate more to us than I think we'd like to think, but essentially if a good business process follows opportunity naming conventions, whether that's campaign naming conventions, having those standards and following those standards is kind of critical to allowing people to, scale things up. I mean, a simple dealing with data, it makes me, the simple thing is campaign naming conventions. It's a very simple thing to wrap your head around, but unless you start to see it, it makes perfect sense. So that's kind of, data, leads, and all that kind of fun.
Yeah, well, your comment on making it scalable, cleaning data as a scalable solution is 100% right, because you certainly can't rely on updating like one record at a time. And one technical solution to that in Pardot that some people don't think about is utilizing an engagement studio program to clean data. They think about engagement studio programs as just a tool to send emails, but Allie in chat, if you find that thread in there and you're kind of like, Celine, what are you talking about? She lists out that utilizing engagement studio program. So do a little read up on that, because that's that scalable solution that Luke was chatting about. Awesome. It's definitely an ongoing challenge, right? It's not that anybody has it completely solved. We're always dealing with bad data. It's just a matter of not ignoring it and creating a strategy to manage it. All right, so with that being said, so we've got data in the system, right? We know where Pardot and Salesforce interact with your tech stack. You've got data. Now, how do you use data and features in Pardot to create meaningful conversations with prospects? Is there a favorite program or a favorite feature that you have seen help a lot when it comes to creating meaningful conversations? Because quite frankly, I feel like it's easier said than done. So I'm just curious to see, what you guys have experienced with that and kind of some success stories. Lindsay, we'll let you start.
Sure, thanks, Celine. So I would say one of the things that it allows us to do is get pretty personalized with our content. And one of the things that we've implemented over the past year with our sales team is the ability for them to select certain account targets based on an ideal customer profile that we provide them. And we really stress with our sales team that data has to be complete for that customer target. And so it's a ABM program where we're working leads at the same time. And we've just built some custom fields that flow over to Pardot for us, and some really simple dashboards to understand how those customers are engaging, how the sales calls are going, all that. But just a really simple solution to get more customized with your content, and we build nurturing campaigns based off of that data.
It's really interesting how data keeps kind of playing into everything, right? Even quality of data that empowers you to have meaningful conversations. So it's funny as you were just saying that, it definitely connects the dots, right? For everything from clean data to that meaningful conversation. Rebecca, we'll go back to you for features and data and meaningful conversations. What does that look like for you guys?
Oh yeah, so I think, again, everything starts with data when it comes back to having meaningful conversations with customers and with prospects. And I think kind of what I mentioned before around having that segmentation data and data on sentiment of a customer has really helped us to, again, pull through that personalized content, tailor messaging, so that we can kind of execute that out, and also using Engagement Studio programs so that we can build out those programs and get that tailored message to the right audience, and also the interaction between being able to raise tasks in Salesforce, pull people out into a list and get sales to follow up with them. That's something that's really useful for us, because we can kind of move from marketing automation into a sales conversation and back seamlessly, and everybody kind of knows where everything is. I think having the view into Pardot from Salesforce as well is helpful in terms of having those human conversations and those marketing conversations, and all being the visibility being there for everyone. And there's another example actually about how we're trying to kind of reimagine this using Pardot. Certainly we came to Secante for support with, actually. We wanted to use some of the data from from the Zoopla website to talk to certain customers who'd had properties that had been on the website for a long time. And Mike Cruiser supported us with some this wasn't a simple solution, just to caveat that this was a technical solution that required product and engineering team to support us with. But we managed to use Pardot to pull through dynamic content from the website and send that through to customers with a really clear value proposition, and that really had a really big impact and helped us to kind of double our conversion through the funnel off the back of that. I think that was quite a nice example.
So your note on using the data to inform sales through Salesforce tasks leads me to my next question, actually, which is, how do you get that data from Pardot to inform sales and to keep that sales process going? So, Rebecca, you mentioned it might be Salesforce tasks for you, creating tasks. Is there anything you'd elaborate on that for informing sales?
So the reason we use tasks a lot is because of how known our database is. We don't have a huge amount of new data coming in. We do have that, but and we use leads to manage that in the kind of standard Pardot and Salesforce way. But we've had to sort of move more towards task usage for our known contacts and customers, because Pardot won't raise a lead against an existing contact. And that's been something that was a bit of a behavior change because we weren't using tasks before, but actually it works really well for kind of raising activity. It's recorded everywhere. We can alert a salesperson really quickly to something and enable that conversation to happen quickly. So yeah, and again, like I really liked Luke's SLA around the 5-minute response. I might have to implement that on our task creation.
Yeah, I was going to pass it to Luke next, actually, for that question of how do you inform sales with your Pardot data, because we're all latching on to the 5-minute SLA, Luke. How do you do it?
You just pass it to them and tell them to phone them as quickly as possible. No, I mean, essentially for us, it's about getting it into a queue, essentially. It gets into a queue and then they get their alerts, their lead assignment alerts out. And then they, have to place a call. We use a fairly simple routing system, which is, for our inbound SDRs, we just have a single queue in Salesforce that it goes into and then gets round robined out. When your SLA is that short, you try to, detach as many places as possible where it could go wrong, because as it is, you need it to flow quickly and succinctly, and you don't really want a middleman that's going to cause you any problems. So when it comes to passing stuff to sales, obviously we'll pass over the lead record into a queue. The queue then assigns out. But we've used lead stages to alert them to it being new, and then they accept to convert. But yeah, we try to keep things simple to make sure that there isn't as many places for something to break, because as we know, dealing in MarTech, great having lots of MarTech until your middleman breaks.
Yeah, awesome. I love what Luke just said there. He said he assigns it to queues, Salesforce queues, and actually a lot of people don't know you can do this in Pardot. So another little technical tip I'm throwing out there is you've got your assigned user functionality in Pardot where you assign it to an actual individual, but you can create and connect to your Salesforce queues in Pardot. So if you didn't know you can do that, look that up, because that can increase your Salesforce connection to Pardot as well. Still assigning, getting that sync and integration working, but utilizing queues instead of an actual individual, which is what Luke was chatting about there. Awesome. Lindsay, I still want to throw it over to you to see how you're getting valuable Pardot data to your sales team too.
Yeah, so this is an ongoing challenge for, I think, a lot of people. One of the things that I agree with everything that's been said, but one of the things that I think is so important with your sales team is making sure that sales leadership is on board with what you're doing. That was one of the things that we learned from when we implemented Pardot, is we didn't necessarily have the sales leadership buy-in for how we were going to do things. And so giving them the tools to monitor how fast the team's responding, the dashboards, like some of our sellers, they might say it's kind of Big Brother-like, but it is helpful to measure adoption with your sales team, because if you're bringing in a lot of leads and they're not getting responded to, that's a really big problem, and that can make it even worse than what you had before. So that's just a quick tip. Our sales team tends to get a lot of Salesforce tasks, and so we don't do as much of that. We just do really consistent training. We have champions in all of our regions that can talk about why it's important. We continually communicate our results so that they understand that the more you respond to the leads we're sending, the more that you get data into the system, the better the system's going to be for you. And you're going to start to see results because we work those leads while you're working them as well.
Ooh, reporting out on results, huge. Let's talk about that. So, Lindsay, how are you reporting out on the success of your marketing initiatives?
So I don't think any marketer is satisfied with attribution, but we've actually had Serconte helping us quite a bit lately in this area, and helping us get B2B MA set up correctly, campaign naming consistency. So we have an automated script that names campaigns for us, which is really helpful. And so it's constant. You have to kind of find your balance there. There's a lot of data in there. We also have a campaign influence dashboard. But what I have found is best is just because you said something's working once doesn't mean that some of the major players are going to hear that. So you constantly have to be communicating your results. You can build simple dashboards that people can view. Not everyone in the organization speaks marketing. In fact, in my organization, we come from a very old school industry. So if I say things like B2B and marketing attribution, they look at me like I'm nuts. So I just really have to translate it to them and what it means for our customer and how many opportunities we're winning. That is what they really care about. They don't necessarily care about how many clicks I have on my website.
Yeah, 100%. Rebecca, what about you? How are you reporting on success from your marketing initiatives?
Yeah, I think we're probably a little bit earlier on in the process than Lindsay, but we've kind of gone through that process of making sure all of our campaigns are named consistently. We've turned on connected campaigns, and we're starting to use campaign influence reporting now. And I think very similar themes around making sure that we've got advocates in the sales team, and just kind of making following up on all of the things that are in there at the moment, so that I can really be sure that the data in those reports, in that campaign influence report, is completely accurate. And then our plan is to communicate that back through into the sales team and make that really visible to them on an ongoing basis, and highlight it even to the individual point, like who are the top people for kind of influencing off the back of a campaign. I think that kind of interaction is really important. And yeah, we kind of have regular cadence around reporting. So we are pulling through data from different areas of Pardot at the moment to complete that. And I think we're really aiming to get to that one single dashboard that we can use to show all the activity that we're doing. As a business, we use Power BI for most of our dashboard reporting. So I think after we've understood how campaign influence works, I think we'll be looking at how we can integrate that report through into Power BI so that it's in the same kind of environment as the rest of our business reports are.
Yeah, so in some consistencies there, right? Lindsay said she was utilizing the campaign influence reporting in Salesforce as well as B2B MA. Luke, are you utilizing similar reporting tools, B2B MA and campaign influence?
Tableau. We are.
Okay.
We have our BI team. We're quite blessed to have a BI team. When I was part of a smaller startup, a lot of marketing operations time was spent doing reporting on close rates, win rates, opportunities influenced, all that kind of stuff. Now we're blessed to have quite a big BI team. So for us, it's a lot of Tableau dashboards. I mean, really, when it comes down to like campaign reporting, it's about influence for us, and then the source of leads and where leads are coming from. that information then kind of flows through to our Tableau dashboards for our executives to see, as well as marketing teams. When we're dealing with many Salesforce instances, having Tableau as this kind of dashboard tool on top of it allows you to detach from this idea of spin up my own dashboard and then look at my own results, because you start to see differences in data between Salesforce instances, whereas having Tableau on top of it all kind of allows you to have one single unified view of everything. So yeah, and then I would say when it comes to Pardot and understanding results, campaigns, campaign membership, and how those tie into your opportunities, and ultimately pipeline being lifeline, ultimately tying into pipeline is the kind of golden rule for us to see how well our campaigns are performing. And also campaign hierarchies are an amazing function. Having many campaigns sat underneath a region and then having those values roll up on the influence level really can give you kind of nice quick metrics to look at. And then obviously you have more detail inside Tableau dashboards and reports. So yeah, that's how we're currently functioning it.
Yeah, Tableau's a pretty complex tool there. This may be a question for your BI team, but you may know, so I'm going to ask. Are there areas of data disconnect from getting the information you need to create a executive level dashboard in Tableau that comes from Pardot and Salesforce? Do you ever have any data challenges with that?
I think probably, I'm not going to speak for the BI team, but I'll speak on my own, what I can understand of it. Essentially, it's the differences when you've got different data sets coming out of differently designed Salesforces. As we know, Salesforce and Pardot, pretty bespoke, specific. If you inherit a Salesforce and a Pardot, it's going to be vastly different potentially than one Salesforce and Pardot that you've had previously. So when it comes to understanding and trying to unify those instances to kind of speak a common language, I think that would probably be the biggest challenge, because the lead object in one Salesforce and the lead object in another, much like the prospect in Pardot in one Pardot and the prospect record in another Pardot, you can see quite large differences between the two. You'll have the basic default fields, but then when it gets into the custom fields, and it can get quite complicated pretty quickly. So I think speaking just a common language would probably be, but that's quite a specific thing for a company that has grown through acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Luke, earlier you touched on something basic, but that's actually can be hard to implement and be consistent with, which is your naming conventions when it comes to even data structure and campaign hierarchy structure. So I just want to reiterate that for everybody listening in, that kind of no matter the size of your company, naming conventions are largely important for keeping your data in sync. And then when you think about running reports, it becomes increasingly important, right? Because if Luke's trying to run a report in Tableau or Lindzee in B2BMA, being able to know what you're typing in for the asset you want to run a report on is huge. So keep that in mind no matter what reporting tool you're utilizing, because that's a common theme with the panelists today. I want to quickly jump into the Q&A here. I saw 2 questions come in that were specifically for panelists. So Becky has a question for Luke. Luke, do you integrate on 24 with Pardot or Salesforce? She says, our team says it's a more powerful integration if we leave on 24 integrated with Salesforce, but it creates a couple obstacles for us in Pardot. What's your experience?
So as I'm sure everybody on the phone is aware, Pardot and integrations is kind of a little bit of a odd spot for it. If you've got a native integration, like if you've got a native integration into WebEx, the actual flow is amazing. On24 doesn't have a native integration into Pardot, sadly. On24 actually utilize a product called Scribe as a kind of middleman. Essentially, it's like a tray workflow or Aircool, or not Aircool, essentially like a middleman. So at the moment, we integrate on24 into our website, and then that information then passes we actually just download it manually and then upload it into Pardot. We've actually got an integration developed into Pardot using Scribe. Just haven't had time at the moment yet to complete it. I would previously, when we had Marketo, we did have it as a native integration between Marketo and On24, and that can pass into Marketo, which then flows into Salesforce. I would say if it's integrated in, I would say the likelihood is that the integration into Salesforce is probably as powerful as you'll get out of Pardot. I'm interested to know, Becky, what obstacles you've got in Pardot when you're dealing with Salesforce, just out of interest. Because yeah, essentially like On24 is in itself not a particularly integration friendly technology. And sometimes that can just cause a few issues. But the Salesforce connection that they have is quite good. So I would just be interested to know what the obstacles are you're facing in Pardot to see if you could solve for them, basically.
Awesome. And then one for Rebecca here. Rebecca, do you use a specific app for data cleansing in Salesforce? Michelle wants to know.
To be honest, I don't do the Salesforce side of the data cleaning, so I'm not entirely sure, but I'll definitely have a look at that and see if I can find that out for you. But in terms of the on the Pardot side, there's definitely things that you can do that are more automated. That's in that realm, which Celine's already talked to. But there's other things as well, like creating dynamic lists that pull through certain bits of bad data. So that can really help you out if you if your data in Salesforce isn't as clean as you'd like it to be. You can pick some of those things up by kind of looking for common things in like email addresses or anything like that that aren't what you would want in your database, and you can remove them out automatically.
Awesome. Yeah, data cleansing is huge, guys, and there's a couple different nuances and ways to do it out there. So I know we've got 2 minutes left in our panel today. Lindsay, if you could round us out, if you had one big piece of advice, it can be technology Pardot related, it could be overall marketing strategy related. If there is a company, an enterprise company out there like yours, and you could give them one piece of advice in 2020, what would it be?
Okay, so if you were just starting out in Pardot, I would, I think the biggest learning lesson I've had is that there is so many functions that you need to get on board with your vision for doing marketing automation correctly, from sales to your BI team, even like HR. It's just really important to make sure that you have a plan and a vision for Pardot and what you're going to achieve. And then just get a really qualified partner. One of the things that I value in partners are being accountable and responsive, and not to bash larger agencies or anything like that, but our sweet spot, we've really found some smaller agencies. When we chose Serconte, we actually got Andrea on our initial call, and I remember our procurement team saying, wow, I can't believe they put their CEO on this call. But to me, I really value stuff like that. And I know they're going to be a good partner, even though they're not some big multinational agency. So just find those partners that are going to help you out and be accountable and responsive.
I love it. Definitely finding somebody that's an extension of your team and that fits well is super important to getting stuff done. All right, guys, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you to all of our panelists for spending time with us today. Thanks to everybody in chat and Q&A. That's a wrap.